We just saw The Imitation Game, and on this show, I take my friends, we go see a movie, we review it in the car, and we have a discussion. The review part is spoiler-free, so if you're on the fence or trying to decide if this is the movie for you, watch the review for our recommendations. And if you've already seen the movie or don't care to worry about spoilers and just want to hear everything that we thought, watch the whole thing. We'll get into all of that detail. The Imitation Game is the story of Alan Turing breaking the Enigma. Alan Turing is played by Benedict Cumberbatch in this movie. I have seen this story dramatized one other time. Back in 2001, there was a movie called Enigma that fictionalizes everything to the point where, you know, the characters are pretty much unrecognizable. There's a Turing stand-in who's very different. There's, you know, a Jones stand-in who's very different. And so what I was really happy about with this movie is that it gets a lot of the history right, and it also touches on one of the sort of more timely things, which is Queen Elizabeth II posthumously pardoning Turing for some of the things that happened to him later in his life. The movie is done really well. Benedict Cumberbatch plays kind of goofy very well. Like, that's something that he's good at. He plays sort of the not very social genius style of person. It's not completely the same as his Sherlock character. It's a more subdued, less charming character than that, I would say, but it has sort of that feel to it. And I think just in general, I would say that if you're interested in the story of Turing, who's basically the father of modern computing, if you're interested in how the British broke the Enigma code and helped them win World War II earlier, or if you're just interested in learning more about those people, I think it's a good movie to see. There's some things that are obviously dramatized for movie purposes, but I don't feel like they took it so far that it's, you know, you can still recognize the characters and the players that are in it. They're not attributing things to Turing that he didn't do, or they're not, you know, making, not to a huge degree. There are some things that they attribute to him that he didn't do, like he didn't decide how much of the code to, you know, give to the military or anything like that, and there wasn't like one guy in MI6 that was basically running the whole thing. But from a storytelling perspective, from a screenplay perspective, that makes it really easy to follow, and I can't fault the movie for that, because I feel like people that don't know anything about Turing or Enigma or any of that kind of stuff can see this movie and really have a pretty good concept of what that story is, what that's about. So I would highly recommend it, especially if you like documentaries, biopics. Certainly helps to like Benedict Cumberbatch, but I don't think that's necessarily a prerequisite. And, you know, an interest in, you know, technology, which is something I think most people have nowadays. So I would recommend it. What'd you guys think?
Yeah, I really enjoyed it all the way through. I think going in, I kind of knew a lot of the high points of Alan Turing's life, so I felt like I could follow along, but I think they do a good job of catching you up, even if you're not necessarily very familiar with them at all, and fill in all the blanks that you may or may not know. Mm-hmm. So it's just a really fascinating piece of history, I think, from, you know, a few perspectives, just as, you know, kind of the starting point of modern computing, and cryptography, I think, is really interesting. Maybe not to everybody, but yeah, just a really interesting piece of history, I think. And then just the kind of the tragedy of Alan Turing's life, told in a really respectful way. Mm-hmm. I thought, like, it was done well, even with some of the dramatized parts in the movie, like Dale mentioned. But yeah, I think it's yeah, it was just, I really enjoyed it. I think a lot of people would probably enjoy it, actually.
Mm-hmm. I thought it was great. I did not know a lot about his life. I knew some of, like Jeremiah said, the high points and definitely some of the low points, but I couldn't sit there and tell you what parts were dramatized and what parts were not. Dale, I know you've probably got a better handle on that, but I thought it was easy to follow. I mean, so not knowing a whole lot about him, I thought that I could follow the entire thing real easily. The other thing that I just thought was really good was just the screenplay itself, the language used, which just his dynamics and the language he used with the other characters when he was talking to them, which a movie that's about language, I thought that was a really good use of it.
Yeah,
Definitely.
yeah. Even at the very beginning, like when there's like a voiceover starting and you hear him talking, it's really interesting because he doesn't like I kind of alluded to earlier. It would have been really easy for him to just play Sherlock. To just do Sherlock, and he's not as sure of himself as Sherlock is. He's not as confident or charming or and he's not as like written as Sherlock is.
Kind of made me think of Benedict Cumberbatch plays Sheldon.
Yeah,
I can see that.
There was this one great exchange that no spoilers. Let's just say it's early in the movie about going to lunch. That's just a back and forth. Just the dialogue there and the way he delivered it and the way the rest of the cast delivered it back to him. It was just a lot of fun to watch and a lot of fun to listen to.
Yes. And I know people exactly like that. Yeah. I know people that were, computer science majors, and that's the way they talked when they were 19. Yeah, it's a very accessible movie. The story's very accessible. It doesn't dumb things down, but it makes things easy to understand. The cryptography part of it, instead of, just showing you a bunch of complex equations and saying, we're figuring stuff out, they talk about things in terms of crossword puzzles and that sort of stuff. So there's a lot of things that are there to help the audience kind of understand what's going on. So anyway, that's a very favorable review from us. We're going to get into the discussion part. So if you are going to see the movie, this is where you turn it off. Don't let us spoil anything for you. One of the big things that was obviously missing from the movie Enigma and from other things was the conversation about how he died. And also it was only last year, this is 2014, it was only last year that the British government actually apologized for their role in his death, which was basically when he was found out to be homosexual, he was found guilty and he was given the choice of it was 2 years, and I believe the real life sentence was it was probably either longer. 2 years in jail minimum. I think it was up to 10. There's like a 2-year minimum, and I think they were leaning toward the minimum side of it as almost as a like, we know that this is like a terrible person to do this to, or what everyone sort of saw as the more preferable thing would be to take a bunch of hormone therapy and essentially chemically castrate him, and he dealt with that for a year before he committed suicide. And they, obviously they didn't touch on that in the earlier movie, but I did like that they at least gave you a picture of what that process was doing to him, like the physical change that was making on him. Yeah, as it would do. I mean, that'd be pretty miserable. Yeah. He's like shaking and couldn't write and all that stuff. So,
yeah, I think I feel like they handled that really well. Yeah. We were kind of talking before the review, talking about how especially at the end, where there's just kind of some, like some movies do this part so badly, where they just kind of have something going on in the background, and then they just have some text to tell you what everything, like as some little footnotes to the story, and a lot of times that's just really terrible. Storytelling sometimes, but the way they did it in this movie, it really, I feel like it had a lot more impact. Yeah,
and something that may have, it may not be like obvious. I don't think it's obvious when you watch the movie if you don't know the story, but the investigation where the police are looking into him, that's not chronological. with the story.
Yeah.
All of that stuff takes place long after Enigma.
And I was gonna say that it's probably one of my probably a minor complaint is like it wasn't super confusing the way they would do the time jumps, but sometimes it was abrupt enough that I wish they would maybe done it. Like I think the weird thing for me was sometimes they would do the time jump and give you a date.
Yeah.
But then sometimes they wouldn't, and I wish they would have just picked one or the other. Because like if you were paying attention, it was generally easy to follow.
Yeah.
But the inconsistency of that was
Yeah, it was interesting
odd.
because the first few times, the first time they would visit a particular time period, they would show the date.
Yeah.
And then I figured, okay, they're just going to show up for the first one, then we're going to figure it out afterwards. But then sometimes, particularly when they would be going back to the World War II era, they would then show the dates again when they would go back to that time period, but sometimes they wouldn't.
Yeah.
And then sometimes there was also there was the World War II period, there was a period when he was a kid, there was the period in the 50s when he was arrested, and then there was a period about a year later. So there were 4 time periods, and the World War II period took place over a period of 2 years.
Yeah. And it was, I mean, the way that they wrote the screenplay was it sort of had this ticking time bomb thing where the police at first they think he's a spy, and then they start to find out, well, no, he's not a spy, he's a homosexual, and the police are like, well, we're not after homosexuals, like that's not what we're trying to figure out.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting.
And then at the end you find out that he's actually been convicted, and that's when like Keira Knightley's character comes back and talks to him, and they don't do a really great job of telling you quite how much time had passed until they give you that like end cap, which says, in 1954, after a year of therapy, he committed suicide. But having said all of that, like I think it's one of those things, like it serves the story so well to do it that way that you can. It's not a big deal that like it doesn't quite. It's not quite so easy to follow like the chronology of it, but you get the whole sense of the story, and it works from a dramatic standpoint. It's just if you pulled people walking out of there, when did they find out that he was homosexual, or when did when did that investigation start? They'd be like, well, like I don't know, like couple years before he broke the code, like because that's kind of how it seems in the movie, and that's not really the case. So
I didn't have that much trouble with the chronology on it, but I can see where that it was.
I feel like just like a little bit of tweaking could have made those transitions a little smoother.
And that was honestly the one thing that I noticed as far as like them not having their facts right. I mean, I was really happy that they didn't play up the romance and the not romance of him and Joan, that character, that they made that feel more realistic and more natural. It was sort of and this is that was more historically correct, which was they were doing things that they needed to do to appease her parents so that she could stay on at Bletchley Park without telling them like, hey, I'm working for the military.
And I mean, even forgetting for a second that was more historically accurate, I think that from a character and from a narrative perspective, that really brought out some interesting parts of his character. Like when he comes up with the lie on how to get her to leave her parents' house, that was a very fun side of him that we hadn't really seen before, because it was this guy who's very, very literal in all senses of the word, and this is kind of the first time we're really seeing him tell a lie. And just their relationship for the entire thing, where they had kind of this, you could tell they cared about each other, and he didn't really care about a lot of people from what you could tell. But it wasn't, obviously a romantic, at least not on his part, situation. So I don't know. It was historically accurate, and it was kind of a fun part of the movie.
Yeah. Well, and he respected her.
Yeah.
And she was somebody that didn't like, she wasn't arrogant about how good she was at what she was doing. So she was somebody that he felt like he could help out, Yeah,
and she was great in the movie too, Keira Knightley.
Yeah, definitely.
She did just fine. So yeah. Anything else you guys think of?
No. The weirdest parallel ever, because I just watched The Giver this weekend, so all I could think of with Alan Turing's character on screen was precision in language. Because that was a big thing on The Giver.
Yes.
So all I can say is when you're watching this on your computer, thank Alan Turing.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah, all you have to know is Heil Hitler. Was one of my favorite
That's true.
lines.
All you have to do to break Enigma.
All you have to do to break Enigma is know Heil Hitler.
Heil Hitler.
Yeah. It's awesome.
I'm going to assume that that's 100% historically accurate.
Pretty close.
No, I'm going to assume that they said that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, because they mentioned at the beginning that, like, he didn't speak German.
Oh, right.
And he's trying to crack a code that's
In German.
in German, yeah.
That's all the German you need.
But yeah, yeah, there was like a whole, and again, I mean, this was just streamlining for the story's sake, and the other movie actually did talk about this a lot more, but there was just this army of women listening to those radio codes
yeah.
and typing them out and filing them, and
Yeah.
like it was like a human database
Yeah.
that they had running in England for, you know,
Years.
at least the entire European theater of World War II. So yeah, that's the Imitation Game. If you like the way we do these, please like the video, subscribe, check out all the video and written reviews over at dalemaxfield.com, and thanks for watching.